Australian artist Rickamore had a great description of Montsalvat. He described it as a fantasy of beards, berets, sturdy women, big stews, and free love. And honestly, it's fun to think of it in this way. A Bohemian enclave, back to the land, but not just more than an hour outside of Melbourne CBD.
And it's where these artists lived and argued, worked, cooked, carved, and by the sound of it, had a lot of fun. Montsalvat is Australia's oldest continuous artist collective. But back when people called it an artist colony, meaning more a rural creative community built around a shared philosophy, it was more like a small universe of bohemian activity. Yes, many hands built it, but what's easy to miss is this. A huge amount of Montsalvat was built by women. Brick by brick, beam by beam, right there in the hillside mud. So for decades, Montsalvat's story was told as if it just sprang fully formed from one mind, Jorgis Jurgensen, a painter who had rejected architecture as a profession and then grew increasingly hostile to the commercial art world and conventional living. So what was his response? Build a world of his own. The last couple of years have pushed a very different truth into the public consciousness. The women that were there from the beginning, they weren't just muses or assistants. They were the builders, they were the designers, they were the craftswomen, and they were major decision makers. The Women of Montsalvat exhibition this year made this undeniable. These women were painters, jewellers, ceramicists, weavers, filmmakers, stonemakers, printmakers, cooks, entrepreneurs, photographers. But for deep cut design, I want to zoom into one group in particular, the women who built the buildings and made many of the design decisions that shaped this place. Now, people back then thought it was unusual that there was this group of women staying up late and debating politics and philosophy, building. But, let's be real, women have always stayed up late and had big conversations. That part isn't what's unusual. What was unusual was that these women were mixing lime mortar, they were carving gargoyles and teaching the men how to make mud bricks. But here at Montsalvat, they did exactly that. Let's start with the extraordinary Lily Jurgensen. So some people complain that she used to be written off as a footnote, the founder's wife. But from what I've discovered, I highly doubt that was ever the reflected reality. She was known as a quietly formidable presence whose influence shaped Montsalvat from day one. She was one of Victoria's first anaesthetists. She specialised in women's health, where in the 1920s it was still treated as something vague and mysterious rather than real medicine. She painted, she built, she studied psychoanalysis, she spoke multiple languages, she even translated Carl Jung from German into English. And crucially, she was the one who bought the land and financed Montsalvat.
There's a great story where apparently she was threatened outside of Eltham Station, and she said to the attacker, "You don't know what kind of woman I am. I build houses out of mud," which apparently he was so intimidated by he just ran off. And then the locals were left with a fantastic Lily Jorgensen anecdote.
Then you have the Skippers, a dynasty of artists whose fingerprints are all over at Montsalvat. So Sonia Skipper was the powerhouse. It was she that learned to make the mud bricks and then taught the local men how to build with them. She actually became the first foreman for architect Alastair Knox. That's the same Knox who later became famous for the mud brick movement. Now, she did deal with plenty of sexist behaviour on Knox's building sites, but eventually earned a deep respect for her knowledge of building materials, such as rammed earth, limestone and bluestone. Now, I've worked in the construction industry and I can't imagine what it must have taken a woman in the 1930s to teach men construction techniques. So back at Montsalvat, She built the mudbricks, she carved wood, she carved the stone. In the bluestone chapel, the timber beams you see sit on stone corbels, and Sonia sculpted every one. Tucked underneath them is a small figure that she carved of the people all around her: her father Mervyn, her partner Arthur Munday, her brother Matcham, herself, Helen Lempriere, and even Justus Jurgensen. And the gargoyles on the Great Hall, those were hers too. Helen Skipper, her sister, worked alongside her, helping construct part of the gatehouse and other buildings. Together, these two women worked to carve numerous of the window surrounds. And the crenellations on top of the Great Hall, those castle-like forms that define the fantasy medieval artist colony vibe, many of those were carved by Sonia as well. Myra Gould, who married Matcham Skipper, Sonia and Helen's brother, became part of the Skipper creative lineage as well. She was a master jeweller, and together with Matcham, she created many of the lead lights that glow in the Great Hall and Chapel. Another name you would have rarely heard in the old Montsalvat story is Helen Lempriere, an artist with a rare international reputation at the time, and the namesake behind today's Helen Lempriere's Sculpture Prize at the Sculpture by the Sea in Sydney. She carved many of the stone features around the site. She sourced funds and materials for the ornamental pool. She gathered the lime and the mortar for the Great Hall's construction. These women built Montsalvat from fragments of Australia's own architectural past. Ornate windows salvaged from the 1880s Empire Building on Collins Street, once one of Melbourne's most ornate commercial facades, then to be graced by Helen and Sonia's beautiful carved window surrounds. There's wharf timbers from Wollongong and railway sleepers finding new life in the walls. There's clay and stone from the surrounding Eltham hillside. There's chapel stone reclaimed from the Wheel and the Wrecker, who is a well-known name from Melbourne's great demolishing of the city. And there's parquetry flooring, made from timber once used in the Reserve Bank's bullion room. You could say that they were recycling before recycling was even a movement. The Women of Montsalvat exhibition this year really showcased the women behind the construction, craft, art practice and culture of this astonishing community. We're focusing on the building here because this is a design channel, but the truth is clear. The Women of Montsalvat weren't add-ons or assistants. They were architects of a new way to live and make. And even if their names had faded for a while, the buildings tell the truth that the old histories didn't.